Hello, welcome to another episode of the Agile Uprising podcast. This is the fourth in a series on leadership and was recorded live with audience participation. So when you hear references to populating the lean coffee board, dot and Roman voting, etc., please don't try to play along. Welcome to today's webinar, Catalyst, the next level of leadership with Bill Joyner. Today's show is co-sponsored by Agile Velocity and the Agile Uprising, and I'll tell you more about both of those organizations. I'm Andy Cleff, and joining me is my friend, mentor, and colleague, Richard Dahlman.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining.
We're delighted that Bill Joyner could make time in his work week. He's a sought-after international thought leader, book author. Many of you, I hope, have read Leadership Agility. If you haven't, grab a copy. Focuses on the mindsets and the skill sets that leaders need in business in the environment today that's complex, uncertain, and very fast-paced. And before we close out, we'll give you some ways to get in touch with him, as well as learn more about the opportunities to learn about his approach. Bill, thanks. It's great to have you.
Hey, it's great to be here. And I like your format. So I'm looking forward to see what happens here.
Me too. Everyone's been different.
That's the thing about the format, right?
Right. So we have over 50 people that have joined us from all over the world.
Great.
You know, one of these days we'll do a poll, what country you're in. And we also have a tool that I'm pasting into our Zoom chat here, where folks can take a look at the questions that are coming up. And everybody has 3 votes to cast on, and these will be the topics that we cover today after an initial question that we posed to Bill. I'm also putting in some hashtags and some handles if you feel like social sharing this out in real time. So Bill, you ready to get started?
Sure.
The first question comes from a wonderful book, Brene Brown's Dare to Lead, subtitled Brave Work, Tough Questions, Whole Hearts. It goes like this. What, if anything, about the way people are leading today needs to change in order for leaders to be successful in a complex, rapidly changing environment where we're faced with seemingly intractable challenges and an insatiable demand for innovation? Bill, thoughts?
Yeah, well, to me, that's the theme of this conversation. And so it has everything to do with catalyst leadership. And I know one of the questions is about what are the characteristics of catalyst leadership? And another one is, how do you move from achiever, the previous stage, to catalyst? For those of you who don't know, in this leadership agility model that came out of the research for the book, there were 3 levels of leadership agility that were identified, with most leaders being at the first level, and then expert, what we call expert, and then the next most at achiever, and the least at catalyst, which is what we really need the most. So that's kind of what the framework looks like. So would it be helpful, Andy, do you think, if I talked a little bit about the characteristics of a catalyst leader?
Please do.
Okay. All right. So where to start? There are internal ways of being aware of your surroundings and yourself, and there's intentionality aspects to it, there's behavioral aspects to it. So just to try to be kind of putting this into a nutshell, one of the things at the core of catalyst leadership is a certain kind of awareness that these leaders develop, and it has a dual aspect. One is their awareness of themselves is such that not only are they able to self-reflect, as achievers can do, which means you're looking back at yourself in the past and getting insight by doing that. These leaders can also be aware more or less in the moment. So you could have a leader come into a meeting with all good intentions of creating a participative conversation, and they mainly just take up a lot of airtime. So an achiever could look back at that meeting and go, oh man, that's not what I meant to do. I've got to really be careful about this next time, really be a good listener, etc. A catalyst would be able to catch this while it was happening. Like, people are tuning out, I'm doing a lot of talking, I'm going to shift gears. So it's that ability to, and that enables agility in the moment, as opposed to sort of episodic agility. And another aspect of the awareness is looking out into the world and into the organization and seeing not only the business processes and business systems, organizational structures, all those things, and what may be wrong with them and what needs to change about them. That's what an achiever can do. But they can also look sort of at, well, what's animating this structure and these systems? It's humans. And it's not just individual humans, it's human systems. It's how the humans are interacting with one another. So the catalyst is able to sort of diagnose what's going on at that level, as well as the structures and systems level, and what needs to change at that level. And so really to a person, the catalyst leaders that we've worked with and studied are trying to create organizational cultures that have high levels of participation, empowerment, collaboration. And why they're doing that is that they have this capacity to think out, you know, an achiever would think in terms of strategy, in terms of, okay, the next couple of years, we need to do this in order to get this outcome. So catalysts they do that, but they're also thinking farther out. They're thinking, well, how can we create an organization that can deal with anything that happens in our environment and respond to it, you know, quickly and effectively. And they feel that a key to that is creating this kind of organizational culture that I was talking about. And I'll just add a couple of other things. You know, achievers are oriented toward building teams, and that's good. Catalysts go further because they build teams that really reflect the kind of culture they want to create in the organization, right? High participation, et cetera, empowerment. And they don't delegate culture change to HR or, you know, this area, that area. They say, first, before we start talking about changing the culture of the company, we're going to change the culture of our leadership team. And that's going to allow us to do two things. One is it's going to allow us to role model and have the credibility that we need to do that kind of leadership. And secondly, it's going to allow us to do it together as a really cohesive, high-performing team. And the last thing I'll say, in what I call pivotal conversations, catalysts, there's something in the leadership agility model called power style, and it has to do with when you're working through differences with other people. We all have sort of an assertive side that we bring to that conversation and a receptive side that's interested in learning from the other person and helping them get what they want while we get what we want. At the expert level, the tendency is to be either highly assertive or highly accommodative. And gradually, as you go through these levels, the power style becomes more integrated. And so at the catalyst level, leaders are able to really turn on a dime. They can say, here's what I think, here's why I think it, tell me what you think and why you think it, and go into receptivity mode and really seriously consider what somebody else is saying and then integrate that with their own thinking and come back. And so they can create a kind of a dialogue that is not as easily achieved at previous agility levels.
Nice. So we're doing 5-minute time boxes. For those in the audience, take a look at your Lean Coffee window and let us know if you'd like to extend the discussion on this topic or finish it. And looks like neck and neck. Yeah, let's end. Richard, you want to grab the next one?
Yeah, so good segue on the next one. So, you know, given kind of the state of things right now, what are some of the ways that we can support leaders that may have a tendency to kind of go back to their either traditional command and control or other behaviors when they're faced with periods of crisis like we have right now?
Mm-hmm. And in reference to this model, that usually means moving to the expert mode, which is kind of a firefighting, tactical, non-strategic approach to getting things done. Yesterday, I was leading a workshop on leadership agility coaching, and the group with us was a group of Agile consultants. And one of them was talking about her work with in healthcare right now. And she's working with a group that is just being crushed. I mean, they have no time, they're in constant crisis mode. But what she was able to do was to build into their work somehow retrospectives, right? Which allowed them to step back and look at things from a larger perspective, kind of like at least what I would call achiever, which is that a reflective mode that zooms out to get more context. Now, in that particular case, they were in crisis mode or expert mode for a good reason. I mean, it's a genuine crisis, right? We all know
Yeah.
that. But so she didn't have any illusions that she was going to change that. But she was able to give them like an oasis, a stepping back place, and where they could at least acknowledge that that's what they're doing. This is how we want to be operating all the time, but we do have to do that now. We need to support each other. And we need to make sure that as the crisis eases, we don't stay in this mode simply out of habit.
Right.
So I thought that was pretty interesting. So anyway, that's my.
Yeah, I love that. Many of our listeners, and I know both of you are familiar with the Cynefin model, and there's different ways of operating depending on the environment. And if it's chaos or complete unknown, somebody needs to take control to get you to complexity, where then you have experimentation and perhaps at times of extreme crisis, expert mode is necessary. But I love that you acknowledge it and you say, this is what I'm doing explicitly, and here's the limit to get us out of this situation to a less chaotic situation, and then be mindful of not falling back.
Yeah. And on a somewhat less extreme scale, I mean, I'm thinking of a software company I've been working with for many years, and they've had, it's a relatively small company. They've had their periods of crisis, or where the CEO would suddenly discover that things are just going awry in the marketing organization, and we've got to get to the bottom of it. So he would begin to move in to get a closer look and to work with the head of marketing. And it was a necessary and helpful thing because he did it in a very constructive way. But the same principles applied, really. He needed to be really clear with himself, the executive team, the people he was moving closer to, that this is a temporary thing. Right. This is not a takeover of marketing. And we're going to move back, but here's why we're doing it, and so on. So one of the tenets of this model, and what the research shows us, is that real leadership agility, let's say full leadership agility, let's say you have somebody who can really operate at the catalyst level at will, that person is also going to operate sometimes at the achiever level and sometimes at the expert level, depending on the environment. So it's not an idealistic or overly idealistic model in the idea that you should always do things this way. But it's also true that most leaders don't have the cognitive and emotional capacities and behavioral repertoire to operate at the catalyst level. So there is a huge need to help leaders move to that level. It's just that there's some flexibility once they get there.
Yeah, cool. Next topic. So many of our listeners are involved in organizational transformation.
Yeah.
Pick your methodology, pick your framework, pick your A word. I like adaptable organization, but it can also be agile. So this question here is, what are the main roles of leadership in an adaptable organization? Let's look at the end state. We're at the beginning state, the current state, but what is the end state, and what does that leadership look like for a really adaptable organization at any scale, or is scale important?
Yeah, well, to me, I mean, I just go back to, I believe catalyst leadership is what's needed to make a truly agile, truly adaptable, truly sustainable organization work in today's environment. So, the characteristics of agile leaders, part of what I was going through there was what I call the 3 leadership arenas. So the idea here is that leaders really have 3 fundamental tasks that are leadership and not management. And so I think, in reference to the question, you need leaders who are operating at the catalyst level in all 3 arenas. That is, leading organizational change, how they go about that, how they go about leading teams, and how they engage in pivotal conversations, which means conversations where you have real differences you have to resolve. So, and as I said, that a big part of that is creating not only using the appropriate agile methods, and putting the agile methodologies and systems and methodologies in place, but also the things that encourage everyone to be agile, such as the organizational culture. And we all know that structure has the two things that probably most influence organizational culture are organizational structure, so that's certainly important, and leadership. So the one of the sort of tip-offs that somebody is maybe at the catalyst level is that they sincerely ask for feedback on their own leadership. And that's just part of how they live their life. So that's just one of many examples of how catalyst leaders role model and create, if you're going to create a team that embodies a catalyst leadership culture, the participation and empowerment and so on, the leader themselves has to model that, right? So it requires a lot of self-awareness, a lot of, very, very much of a growth mindset, and an openness. Like an achiever is open to feedback. If you can persuade a achiever that if they do something differently, it's going to better allow them to achieve an outcome that they want to achieve, they're probably going to listen to that. But the catalyst leader tends to be more broadly curious about themselves, first of all, in terms of, where's my edge? What are the things I need to be more aware of? And I'm thinking of one guy that I had a coaching relationship with who was really just kind of beginning to move into the catalyst level. And he would always come to coaching sessions with a new, like, oh, I just discovered this about myself. Let's talk about this. I want to work on that. It's that kind of curiosity and interest and commitment to your own leadership development. I think that can be contagious. And when you combine it with some of these, with agile methods and ways of leading change and so on and so forth, it can really make a difference.
Yeah. I think if we look at the next question that's queued up, so what are some of the actionable steps that someone could take as they're kind of looking at whether they're at the expert level to the achiever level or the achiever to the catalyst level? Are there some kind of concrete actionable steps that are common for individuals to be able to consider?
Yeah. So let's start with the achiever to catalyst, because we've been talking about what catalyst is. So at the core of it, and I know one of the questions was about reflective action, and it is some reference to it being a core practice of leadership agility. I consider it the core practice of leadership agility. It's what makes you agile. Maybe I should say what that is, and then I'll talk about the achiever catalyst. I mean, that is reflective action in my mind is you're focused in on something you're trying to do, and you're able to mentally step back and see the larger context around this, and then gain insight through that reflective process, create a new intention that will bring you to a more effective place to meet the situation as it is emerging. So part of this, so the achiever already has this reflective ability to look to the past, to think forward strategically. So it's a matter of beginning to learn to be aware of things more as they're happening and becoming curious about, oh, what am I feeling right now? Maybe it's a feeling you're not that familiar with. Well, a catalyst would be interested in that. Mm-hmm. Maybe I've realized because I'm sort of more self-aware as I'm doing things that I'm making some assumptions that perhaps I should test out. Or I'm interested in times when, I meant to do this, but clearly I didn't do that. Or certainly wasn't perceived that way. So, all of those things become of interest as you're moving from achiever to catalyst. And the intentionality, the underlying intentionality shifts as well. So you're going from, we've got to achieve this strategic outcome, to, yes, we do. And we need to build the organization's capacity to deal with anything. And that takes us into these areas that I was talking about organizational culture and so on. So that is post-heroic intent. Part of the model talks about as you move to Catalyst, you're in this sort of so-called post-heroic space. And that's because an achiever is oriented to achieve outcomes, use their team, right? So it's not like a solo effort, but me and my team are going to achieve these outcomes, right? That's what the leadership enterprise is all about. But as you move to Catalyst, the intent becomes, I want to create environments where everybody can be achieving, right? So it's not so much about me achieving these things as it is about, I'm thinking of another coaching client who recently said, he was just kind of in 1 minute recapping his career, from coder to team leader, and now he's chief technology officer who's also overseeing product. So, I mean, he's come a long way in that sense. But he says, what really gets me out of bed in the morning, what really juices me is the pivotal conversations I'm going to have, the coaching, the creating the kind of culture that we want. He is moving into Catalyst. And that sort of intent is what fuels pretty much everything that the Catalyst does. So you want to kind of nurture that.
Yeah. I'm curious, some examples of what's unlocked that intent in any stage, right? Because it's a leap for some people and it's a small jump for others. But in any case, it's a new way of looking and learning, and it's definitely outside their comfort zone.
Yeah. Well, a couple of thoughts on that. I mean, one is that these two aspects of Catalyst awareness are closely related. So the easier thing to practice, and if let's say somebody is not so inclined to think about the organization that way at this point, if they're willing to practice this more in the moment awareness of themselves, over time they're going to develop a more intimate knowledge of their own human process. And that's going to make them more sensitive to that same kind of process in relationships and teams and organizations. So that's sort of the doorway into being able to see the sort of the process, the human process or human system level in the organization. And the other thing is you can just, you could try asking some coaching questions that are more direct, like, okay, well, your unit is, obviously in an incredibly uncertain environment. Are there any things that you can see that would be of value to do that would better prepare your unit for whatever's going to come along? Because who knows what that's going to be. So to get them sort of thinking, that's the kind of the question that the Catalyst would ask, right, to start designing the kind of organization that's needed. So, it may be that they don't jump all the way at one time, that they take, baby steps, but it is a gradual process.
I'm curious, is it common or reasonable to expect that if I'm at the leader level, trying to kind of work my way to Catalyst, is that a bigger hump to get over sometimes versus now I feel like I'm understanding what achiever means than to go to that Catalyst level? Or is it just a spectrum of how we each as individuals need to kind of learn and kind of internalize and adopt some of these things? Is that first leap kind of a bigger leap?
I want to be sure I understand your question. You mean just kind of moving, is it a matter of leaping to Catalyst and then growing into it? Is that kind of what you're saying? Or
well, my question is, so from the expert level to then to get to that achiever level, is that stage of personal transformation in your experience, is that a bigger challenge versus someone who's maybe at that achiever level and the things that they need to do to then move into the Catalyst level? I'm just curious if
well, I would
because
say
of how people are coming from that expert level.
Okay, thank you. I understand now. I would say that relatively speaking, the expert to achiever is easier.
Okay.
And I say that because most of our organizations are geared towards supporting development into expert and achiever. Most of our educational institutions, our leadership training programs, our 360s are pretty focused on achiever. High potentials tend to be achievers. So there's often a lot of sort of cultural support And you often have, and this, I don't want to overly stereotype this, but generally speaking, you would more likely find achievers at executive levels and experts at the middle. So you have role models. But the fact that only about 10% of leaders are operating at the catalyst level means you have less of all that kind of implicit support. Now, I also want to say that this doesn't make it, I don't want to overstate the difficulty in moving to catalyst, or to say that, well, if you don't have an organizational culture that's already got some catalyst stuff in it, that's not going to happen. Because if you look at the book, you see a lot of examples in the catalyst chapter. The stories that are in there are stories of leaders who are surrounded by achievers and expert, bosses, peers, subordinates, and yet they have managed to lead in a catalyst manner, and people have been attracted to them. It's not because anybody knows the word catalyst. It's just the way they operate tends to be draw in a lot of people.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's kind of how I would characterize it as a big generalization.
Yeah, it's an attractor, right? And people may be consciously or subconsciously aware of it. Largely because the catalyst is enabling other people to be better, and that probably comes with engagement and happiness and everything else.
Yeah, and a lot of us are welcome that kind of leadership. Now there are people who are uncomfortable with the idea that they're going to have to take more responsibility. To step into, if there is real empowerment that's being invited. Some are like hesitant, or either it could be, yeah, I know. Somebody told me this in the past. It didn't really work out this way. I'm going to wait and see what happens on this one. Or I just really rather people told me what to do and I'll do it. That works for me. I don't really want to be part of a team making decisions together. And I'm thinking of one example and this was actually somebody who was moving from expert to achiever team leadership, because he was, as an expert, he had this sort of hub and spoke approach, if you will, where he had to be part of, he made all the decisions. He would kind of get one-on-one input from people. He changed the format to a lot of group discussion. He still made the final decisions, but people were much more involved and had much more influence on his thinking in this new format. But he had this one person who was came in his office and said, look, this is not working for me. And she complained for about an hour, and then they got together again, and she complained some more, and they got together again, and they began a coaching relationship. He sort of was able to take his listening and evolve that into, here's what you could do, here's, and she rose to the occasion.
Nice.
So, that's at least possible.
Yeah, there's, this idea of self-organization and autonomy that many teams want. And you brought up the subject, they want that, but they don't want accountability. And that's not real. I don't know where I heard this phrase first, but autonomy without accountability is called vacation, right? And so if that's what you want, take time off.
Or anarchy. Yeah.
Or anarchy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm working with a company now where that is very much top of mind. Their weakness, their CEO and the culture has always been tilted more toward empowerment and less toward accountability. And that, as you say, that really doesn't work. So what the people on the executive team have been having to do with their teams is to see that you really can't have one without the other. And they have kind of a checklist, like, are the expectations clear? Because you can't have empowerment or accountability without clear expectations. And often It was like, well, they're not really that clear. They would ask their team, are my expectations of you clear to you? Well, kind of.
What sort of kind of?
Yeah, right. So they were able to repair that. And then the process is, let's observe what people do with that kind of expectation. Let's provide feedback, positive and corrective feedback. If that isn't creating the kind of empowered accountability that's needed, coaching.
Yep.
If that doesn't work, there are other options. But
so we mentioned at the opening, you wrote a book called Leadership Agility, and that was first published in 2006. What's different in 2020?
Well, I think there's a lot of continuity and some striking changes. At that time, people were pretty hip to the fact that the environment was changing rapidly and getting more complex. I think VUCA became a widespread term some years after the book was published. But now, of course, we have this global pandemic that is, some people say it's like VUCA on steroids. And so, in other words, I think the change in the environment has just become more extreme. And, I'm hearing more as we meet with the coaches that we've trained in our 360 and our Leadership Agility Accelerator tools, they're all reporting that, we need agility now more than ever before. And so and I would say that's another thing that's happened. Of course, the Agile movement has flowered and gone through all kinds of things since then.
All kinds of things.
All kinds of things.
It's a whole nother show.
That's another hour, I guess. But, I think, everybody seems to want an Agile organization now. Not everybody, I think, understands what that exactly looks like or how to get there. But if you ask an executive whether agility is a good thing, they'll immediately say yes.
Right.
And so that's been on the increase as well. Let's see, I had another thought about that. Well, I would just say, it's also, as we know, in the last 4 or 5 years, I guess, in the Agile world, the importance of leadership and culture, has really come on strong. It's just like, well, we tried to do Agile, but turns out they just did the methodology. And first it was like, well, you need to also have the philosophy and the mindset, and that's all true. But then there's this sort of broader, and then as Agile has grown outside of software development, of course. And now it's like, how do we create an Agile organization? All of that has upped the ante for Agile leadership or leadership agility as part of the thing. So I think some people have said they thought that the Leadership Agility book was before its time. Or I think the other way of putting it is more relevant than it's ever been.
Yeah, I get the question occasionally, and I don't know if I ever answer it succinctly enough, but is there a distinction between Agile or what organizations need from what we're defining here as agility, be it leadership agility or organizational agility? Is there a distinction there?
Between Agile and agility?
Yeah.
Well, I guess it depends on how you define those things. But if by Agile you mean a body of methodologies, is that sort of what you're saying? And then, to me, Agile it's an approach. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of doing things. I believe it is the future of management. It grows out into all these other functions. Mm-hmm. It's gonna infect everything in a good way. But agility to me is a property of the organization or the team or the individual, right? So the hypothesis is that Agile methods will make you more agile or will increase your agility, right? So I think you have to constantly be asking, are the methods we're using having the effect that we need? So that's a distinction I would make between sort of the means and the end, perhaps, right? If Agile is the means, the end is agility, that ability to sense and respond to things quickly and effectively.
Right. All right, another chime.
Are you guys able to save the chat when you?
Yep.
Yeah, great.
Yep. Yeah. So I think a kind of maybe an interesting segue again is we'd like to get your view on the new business agility movement. Any thoughts or or considerations in that front?
Well, to me, it sort of relates to what we were just talking about. Um, what I understand that term to mean, and having been at a couple of business agility conferences, it means, well, it means organizational agility in the business sector. But most important, I think it means now that we know how to create agile software development teams, and we're starting to understand what agile HR is and agile everything else, how does all that work together in an agile organization? Right? What are the properties, for a particular company in a particular industry? What are the structures and systems and culture and leadership that's needed to make the whole organization agile? And I think that means you're thinking at the enterprise level, you're thinking at the team level, you're thinking about the individual leaders, thinking of everyone as potentially a leader in the organization. So I think, and this kind of goes along with my prophecy that it just seems so compelling to me that as Agile is moving into these other functions, as problematic as Agile can be sometimes because of the way it's practiced and all of that, but the underlying thrust, I think, and impact is toward creating a new kind of organization, or evolving a new kind of organization for the environment we're in now, and it's not going to get any easier. It's going to get more and more challenging, I think. So anyway, those are my rambling thoughts about business agility.
So one of the things that surfaces a lot, and Spencer put it into the coffee, you mentioned, agility, agile started 20 years ago as a term in software development, and now we're talking about the entire agile organization in HR. One of the things that I see as a conflict is the agile philosophy that it's a team adventure. There's no individual rock stars necessary, although they can be helpful and harmful. And then you have individual incentivizations, either through annual performance reviews, bonus plans, stock options, and all these things. And they create these competing senses of priority. So, what does agile HR look like? What's an agile HR? What's a catalyst HR department like?
Well, to me, those are somewhat different, maybe complementary questions. I'm sorry, you said something just before you asked about HR that I.
It was not a well-formed question. So the anti-pattern towards agility at the team level is the annual performance review,
Okay.
right?
Right.
At the middle management level, it's the bonus related to OKRs or KPIs or MBOs.
Yeah.
So what are some next evolutions of those programs and policies and systems that unlock agility and catalyst leadership at every level?
Mm-hmm. Well, as you know, I think what's happening is that if you get Agile really going at the team level, at the software team level, for example, there are all kinds of impediments that become apparent that are in other functions, accounting, HR, etc. And to create a more agile organization, you really need to bring those functions along as well. Now, I'm not an expert in Agile HR or Agile accounting, for which there's a different name that I'm not remembering. But if you want to think about what is a more catalyst-like HR department, it means that in addition to the more transactional aspects of HR, which are more sort of expert-like, and even there's the more strategic aspect, the seat at the table role that HR can play. There's how can we create a sort of a catalyst culture in our HR unit, so that just as an executive team or another kind of senior team could serve as a kind of role model by actually doing it, being it. That's going to put them, and even if you're so fortunate to have a top leadership team that is truly leading in a catalyst way, which is very rare. There's still a real important role that HR can play in terms of supporting culture change.
Yeah.
So, it means getting really good at, how do we assess our leaders in terms of where they are in their agility? How do we develop the programming that's going to help them grow and grow those who are ready to into catalysts, even though, maybe there aren't that many supports in the organization or role models for that right now. Can we become really good facilitators and teach leaders to do that kind of facilitation themselves, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's the direction I would point in.
Nice. I think this is a good place to wrap up. Coming up in the overall time box, a number of great questions still here. We'll share out the notes somehow at the end of this. Bill, what's the best?
Andy, I just want to say there's one question here in the chat that is easy to answer quickly.
Go for it.
Statistics of leaders at each level: expert 55, achiever 35, catalyst 10. Those are rough, but tend to be confirmed in the organizations we work with. So go ahead, Andy.
Great. So what's the best way for people to get a hold of you, Bill? And what are you coming up in the next couple of weeks that people might be interested in?
Well, the best way to get in touch with me is just send me an email. That's how I orient to the world, is through my email. So it is BJ for Bill Joyner at changewise with an S .biz, B-I-Z. So feel free.
Perfect.
I mean, what's coming up for us right now is that we're starting some, we have a Leadership Agility 360 that we've been training coaches around the world in, including Agile coaches and more Agile coaches. We have a 360 certification program mid-September. We're starting a Leadership Agility coaching. Of course, all of this is virtual. Program once a week from beginning of September through mid-December. So we're really excited about that. That pulls together. We've been teaching leadership agility coaching, which really means how do you help experts become achievers and achievers become catalysts. It's a build on your current coaching repertoire. So we've kind of pulled together and upgraded all of our material and put it online. And so we're excited about who's coming to that and being able to do that.
Yeah, I can give a nod to that. I think it was the very first virtualized class this year. We were planning to be in Boston, and then quick switch at the end of, was it February or March? You guys did an amazing job.
It was March, and we changed. We did it in 10 days.
Yeah.
V1,
if the next version's anything like V1, it's awesome, and I'm sure you and Debbie and the crew have made it even better.
No, thank you, Andy.
All right, a few words from our sponsors. Richard, representing Agile Velocity, tell us a little bit about that org.
Yes, for those of you that may not know, so Agile Velocity, we're a small but very passionate group of Agile coaches and trainers, and we've got an incredible support team around us. But Andy and I are part of that crew. We've got many years of collective Agile coaching, Agile practitioner experience. We also have developed and continue to develop and make available to the community our Path to Agility framework, which is a framework agnostic framework. It's really about helping our organizations understand the outcomes, specifically the business outcomes that they're trying to achieve. And then we work to design a path forward for them that helps them achieve that. So it's not about prescriptiveness, it's not about following a particular framework du jour, but it's really about working with organizational leadership, system level and team level, so that we have clarity on the direction we're going and why we're going there.
AgileVelocity.com and path2agility.com for more information there. I'm wearing another hat today. It's my Agile Uprising hat. That's a network that's informal, focuses on the advancement of Agile mindsets as well as global networking. amongst actual practitioners. Very few theoreticians in our group. You can visit us at agileuprising.com, and there's links there to our real-time discussion boards. To all our attendees, thank you for taking the time to join us. I hope this discussion will help you on your journey of leadership agility. This will be re-released as a podcast on Sunday, if everything goes well with my Saturday, on agileuprising.com. And feel free to share it. And stay tuned for the next one. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Bill.
Hey, thanks for having me. It was a really fun talking to you guys.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or a colleague. If this is your first time tuning in, why don't you subscribe and catch the next issue automatically? If you'd like to join the conversation, share your stories about upping your level of leadership agility, visit it agileuprising.com. Join either the coalition or the Discord forum. And finally, support from listeners like you help us cover our hosting and podcast costs. See the show notes for details on how you can become a patron today. Until next time, this is the Agile Uprising Podcast, signing out.